Hello, this is Cadis Brooks. This is the third week on the weekly briefers. Not too much to talk about today. Now, Suncor just spiked. It spiked maybe 14 to 15%, about 13% in one day this last week because its earnings statements, balance sheets, and the income statement, the cash flow statement for the last 3 months was just released, and it turns out it was really good. Still really steady profits, like the last quarterly report. And what is really important is that Suncor doubled its dividend because it had so much cash on hand and was doing so well with profits. But still, Suncor is a great purchase of stock. I am not selling yet. I plan not to sell probably until end of February, something around then. I'll have to see what the finances and the news is like at the time, see where the gas crisis is. There should be no worries that the European gas crisis is going to somehow alleviate quite quickly in any way. There was a deal made between Russia and one of the smaller EU states, and the problem was that Russia was looking to only supply gas in this deal if that weaker state weakened its ties with the EU and NATO. And so that is the kind of dirty dealing that is on top of the agenda for the Russians, and there shouldn't be any worries that they're going to somehow get rid of this crisis overnight. Even when they are supplying some gas, what they're really doing is they're supplying gas at a really good rate. They don't want the price to go low or too low on gas. They want the price to be where it's at that critical max, where there's no crisis that's going to be caused from the shortage of gas that will lower the Russians' economy, but then still getting the highest price they can. And so, of course, they're going to appreciate the gas shortage and are in no hurry to get rid of that. Suncor still has at least, I would say, 30 to 40% on the upside. I got into the stock around 23 Canadian. It's now about 33 Canadian, but it still has a ways to go. Its pre-COVID levels were, I think, about 42 Canadian. So there still is a lot of room. And to be honest, the balance sheets didn't really suffer much, not as it looks now, as compared to its pre-COVID levels. And the company is very responsible in paying off debt. It's one of the biggest oil companies in all of Canada, and it's integrated. It's even integrated to the extent of researching and developing renewable energy and carbon capture and other forms of green energy for the green energy transition. The other stock, UFC, the Urban Fund, is on the TSXV for venture, so it's on the TSXV, and it is still doing really good. It's got an upward trend of popularity, and even though there's been small sell-offs as the price goes up, which affects the price quite a bit because of its low volume of shares being sold and bought on a daily basis, but even at that rate, it's still got an upward trend of popularity, and its financials are just great. The real estate market is just so hot in Canada that this cheap and easy way to get in on the real estate market is probably the best way to get into real estate. It pays a decent dividend, which would be higher than any kind of rent you would expect, especially with interest rates going up right now because of the banks wanting to curb inflation, and then of course them wanting to get out of the economy because they've been spending so much due to COVID and wanting to just leave the markets to themselves. But then also increase interest rates to increase profits for lending money. Now that covers the stock portion for the week. I don't want to get into too much. My last couple of videos have been a little bit longer than I'd like, but let's talk a little bit of philosophy. So I got one point here, it's quite interesting. It's on historiography, which is the method of history. It says, the more history and the better the history on a topic, the more predictable. The more documented activity and better documented activity on a topic, the more predictable. And so that's going to be universal all across. One of the major problems is that we have a really hard time predicting anything with political science or social sciences or history or anything that's not really a part of physics or math or the other similar natural sciences. And the nice point about that little historiography is that there are ways of still predicting things like markets and the economy if you pay attention to I mean, it's not going to be perfect. Obviously, that what I just repeated there wasn't a perfect kind of historiography, but it helped you as a guide, and it's going to increase your success rates on predictions substantially. So another point here which follows is that supply and demand and rational choice theory are two models that can accurately predict in the social sciences while almost all other models fail. Okay, so we're talking about the whole political science, whole social science, all of that. You're going to see lots and lots of models that aren't going to work in predictive theory. Now, rational choice theory, obviously supply and demand is quite easy to understand, which is really good for prediction. And rational choice theory is another very easy model. And it says that people act based on self-interest. So you can predict what other people are going to do, what other businesses are going to do, what politicians are going to do, what governments are going to do, based on their self-interest. You can expect them to act in a broad way towards their self-interest. And so if you keep those two models in mind, you can also figure out various different predictions that will help you, especially in finance, and you can make lots and lots of money if you take the time to understand that so much is uncertain, but if you're prepared with proper historiographical and predictive models, you can increase your success rate. And just increasing your success rate in prediction in markets just a little bit will significantly profit from the ever-changing times. Now I'm going to move over to some policy. I was thinking about the computer chip shortage in North America, and I was wondering about something the UK is doing as a small country. It doesn't have as much access to mining these minerals for making phones, these metals for making phones. But what they're doing is they're recycling phones and computers and other electronics similar to that. I mean, I would even add cars, especially the new cars. Recycling these to gain the precious metals back, gain the computer chips and all of the really expensive precious metals that constitute these things. And I mean, if you think about it, there's a lot of money and utility in these natural resources that have already been extracted and turned into these phones. These need to be recycled. What I will say for Canada is that we're really good at recycling. We have lots of research and intelligence going into environmental policy, and recycling is very high on our priority list. And I think that we can expand even further into computer electronics and into cell phone electronics and cars. And I think that if we can recycle all of these, because you got to understand that these phones are outdating every 4 years, and every single person in the country almost is getting a new phone every 4 years. And what are they doing with that last phone? Are they just throwing it away? I think that it would be in our interest even to pay the Canadian government should pay a bit and say, hey, come return these phones, these electronics to us. We'll give you something similar to a bottle deposit, but of course we'll probably give quite a bit more because it's computer electronics. But anyway, you can come to a designated depot, recycle your phones, your batteries, all these hard to come by objects with very rich minerals, and I mean we're talking lithium, we're talking zinc, even iron. Iron not as much, but the point is that we can utilize our environmental policy, our environmental strength, and turn that into a really good recycling policy for all these metals and computer chips that we're actually having a shortage on in the world, and we become less dependent upon purchasing these phones and metals and so forth from Asian countries or otherwise, and it will be a significant profit for us. On my last point, I'm going to keep this week quite short. I was just mentioning in the last session that we had here about the relations between the U.S. and Canada going back historically, and Brian Mulroney has actually prompted Justin Trudeau and the governing party of the federal government here in Canada to approach and meet Biden in the U.S. Directly and discuss the Buy American strategy and rule that they want to implement that says they can give subsidies to purchasers of electric cars that are purchased from companies that have their bases in the U.S. and they make all of their materials and manufacturing in the U.S. for those electric cars. And then, and I think it was quite substantial how much money they were going to give to these buyers of electric cars. And one thing to really note is that right now electric cars are just hot in the market and in research and innovation and in this green transition. And the U.S. wants to be a world leader in electric cars. They have devoted, with many companies like Ford and Tesla and so forth, towards these electric vehicles. And of course, that is the way the markets are changing. Canada is also going to be keeping up as well. Very important. But this subsidy is against free trade policy. It is a closed-in realist economic policy, and it goes against the kind of liberal tradition of making alliances and friendships in the international realm. These kinds of subsidies, especially so substantial, are even against the international law regarding trade. And Canada doesn't want this. Canada doesn't want to start even some sort of trade war or increasing trade barriers in any way where the U.S. creates the subsidy and then Canada says, well, if they're going to create an unfair advantage for the electric car markets for the U.S., then Canada is going to do the same thing here. We're going to create subsidies for our producers, and then the spiral just continues to happen where more and more industries are becoming subsidized and turning inward nationally instead of outward internationally to lower costs and create strong relationships. And so Brian Mulroney has said to directly approach Biden, go down to Washington and discuss the policies, come to a better arrangement. And I would add that I don't know if it's so much Biden wanting to create these subsidies, but that his voting basis and a lot of voters in the U.S. really want this Buy American strategy. And I don't think they even understand the ramifications of international trade. And I think it's to the extent where the government in the US wants to appease these voters, wants to attract these voters, and is following policies that Trump had implemented, or at least ideologies that Trump has implemented for these voters to support, because uh, the margin that Biden won by in the election was narrow, and so I think Biden is interested in securing more votes, and he doesn't really care about the international trade as much. So potentially, what the Canadian government needs to do is actually make a better appeal to the American public, to the American people, rather than just the government down there, because it appears that the public and the people down there, at least the majority of them, are wanting to turn inward nationally and want to support Buy American strategies, potentially with no research behind them or any wisdom behind them. And so I think that we need to have a better media campaign towards the public down there, to increase our reputation for a good ally, for a trustworthy trade partner, for the history that we've been through, and the economic prosperity that we've created. And I think it has less to do with appealing to governors down there than it has to do with creating a better reputation in the minds of Americans for Canada. And I mean, I could even say for many other countries in the world as well, because the US public seems to be devaluing other countries more and more and becoming much more nationalistic. I obviously mean everything within a proper legal framework. This media campaign, there's obviously going to be restrictions and customs towards such. And I mean, it might sound a bit innovative, my strategy, but it's an interesting starting point for policy discussion, and I think it should be looked into. Yeah, that's it for the week. That says it. Thank you for watching the weekly briefer. I will be coming up with more high strategic ideas and intellectual talking points, and I'll be happy to speak with you all next week. Okay, have a good one.